side, probably Idris is probably going to be their pick there because they normally like playing the Idris combination with a CP jungler. So that could potentially count. If they want to play the range game against this composition, I could see Kavalfar on maybe potentially Gwen or Ringo come out here, but I think most likely Idris is such a strong carry. I can go with the weapon Kestro instead. Okay, wow. So now the key thing is Scarf can only be the ultimate Dragon's Breath is the Baptiste Ordain and the Baptiste Fear is the only things that can cancel along the active camo. So if Scarf can...
We do have a substitute though, as mentioned by the desk. Kundor is not playing today. Cannot make it. So Redix is coming in, and this means that there's also a bit of a role swap as well. Kiana and Nakoa are going to be in the carry position, as Redix will be in the captain position.
Battle for the Halcyon Fold
yeah, I think that's certainly going to be something to keep our eyes on. Obviously, we just saw in the game with Calamity, the substitute player, not necessarily like playing badly or anything, but not working out in terms of the synergy that they had as a team. And that's something you've always got to be conscious with in that situation. Now, from a compositional perspective, I do think it's worth talking about the fact that this is a very G2 composition, pretty much regardless of the fact that they're running with the substitute right now. This is the kind of composition they like playing. SK has a lot of raw power, but not all of it is power that synergizes quite as nicely. Baptiste and Lyra, yeah, that's a great combo in terms of fighting early, but in team fights, like, how do they sync up? It's not necessarily the strongest combination. Kestrel as well, doesn't necessarily play as well with those two, I think. So they're really going to be relying on just making big plays with the burst damage at the beginning of the fights, and then later on, we'll see if they can keep the ball rolling. SK Gaming, on the other hand, this is the pressure cooker we've always seen. There's so much ability to just make fights happen with that Arden. The damage is huge coming out of Vox and Scarf.
So I think I'm with you here that G2's composition with the Vox, Scarf, and this Arden probably much stronger than the SK composition. Very much having clear and easy win conditions, whereas for SK it seems like it's a little bit more difficult and a little bit more reliant on Snowball. However, you do have to take into note that G2 expecting to play this week with G2. Some tweets from Kiana and Nakoa saying that they've invested so many hours into practice as they knew that these games this week would be so important to their seeding, to their chances of making it to the Unified Western Live Championship, and then not to have Hundo play last minute definitely can just really throw that spanner into the works as far as your in-game communication, your mentality going into games. And despite having perhaps the strongest composition on the day, maybe it will be still plagued by the fact that it is Kiana Nakoa in the carry position. It is Redix joining them on the Halcyon Fold.
Yeah, it's a very good point. We'll see if they can sort of maintain their composure. G2 is an old organization and team in Vainglory, though. All of these players have been around the block. They know how to deal with tilt, or at least you would hope that they do. I certainly don't feel like they're the team I'd point a finger at to say this is the team which really crumbles under pressure. So maybe they can make it happen regardless. I do think that they are going to be aided significantly by the fact that their composition is very linear. The things you want to be doing with Arden, Vox, and Scarf are pretty evident, and so it's hard for people to not be on the same page almost. It really is. It's not an autopilot comp by any stretch, but it's definitely one which has very clear strengths and weaknesses. That being said, I do think that what SK has, although not necessarily the most cohesive, coherent plan, is a composition with a lot of disruption in their kit, and that could really make it be the thing which causes the lack of perhaps coordination from G2 to be an issue. Right? Because you need to be able to react very quickly to Lyra blinking and messing up your positioning, or Baptiste Fear, or Kestrel and Stealth, and how are you going to deal with that? You're going to give the guy Crucible so you can walk over the active camo safely. All those things are considerations you definitely have to keep in mind. And that's where I think the biggest window for exploitation almost of what's going on with G2 right now is for SK Gaming.
G2 having a really rough split. Rough season. Dark Potato not being able to commit as much time to the team as previous seasons, and G2 have struggled for it. able to defend their Vainglory 8's position here through the challenge battles. Now with this second chance to really prove themselves. Have to see what they can do. It is a very even game so far. Tyra is now level 6. Shadowglass not quite finished yet. A stun onto Dark Potato. He's going to go very low here, but he's going to be able to walk away with his life. Yeah, Nakoa getting poked under the turret, the range advantage right now for SK Everton, as Dark Potato cannot really participate in these fights. There's no real healing on the side of G2 until Fountain is completed, and Redix is sitting about 100 gold away from that, so not going to be something he can deal with. Tyra's just executing on the fact that no one can really contest them. Redix going very deep in the lane. Kavalafar is baiting the bait. That's going to be a ordained on to Kiana Nakoa, however, and so Redix will be able to walk away. The poke is going to be there still. It is going to be Raph just continuously healing up his team whilst G2 is forced to take it all into the face.
That's an interesting ordained. It kind of speaks about what SK thought was happening, and they were actually correct. That was a great ordain if you expect the jungler is nearby, because it means that they can't actually collapse on you and turn your play into something they can benefit from. Whereas ordain the Arden, sure, might give you higher odds of just finding that pick, but it's risky, because if there's a jungler nearby, then Vox can back up the fight. So yeah, interesting stuff there actually from SK. Really high level thinking going on, and it was the right decision in the end. Even though they didn't get the pick, they put a lot of pressure on G2. Question is, can they stay in this game until the later stages? I think that's what you got to be looking out for here with their comp. Given that Tyrus has already picked up a Shattered Glass, there is a lot of damage already being
Oh, there it is! He's gonna go down! It's first blood to Tyrus! He was saying it, AJ, and it just came to life. The burst on this Batiste, and now this turret under fire as well. I don't think SK are going to give up their harass onto it. The minion wave does get taken out very quickly with this Scarf, but they just have so much poke and siege available to them that they can look to keep it up. These Spitfires keep connecting onto Kavalafar. It could be an argument to give up, though.
I mean, at the moment, the Wrath has so much sustain in the early game. The base heal on Imperial Sigil is pretty huge. Kavalafar is doing a great job of landing poke, by the way. Something absolutely critical about the Kestrel play in this kind of comp. She's the one with the longer range poke damage compared to Batiste, so she needs to set up for the plays. You know, she needs to be able to have them already weakened, so if they commit, you know, opportunistically, Batiste can find the kills, or they can make space to push the turrets and make it safe for Batiste to go close enough to land the bad mojos. It's very important that your Kestrel's doing work. Oh!
One shot, and it's Tyra's finding the kill as well. That is beautiful stuff coming out of SK. They are just going to take down Kiana Nakoa again. Really putting the pressure onto Kiana Nakoa as he is out of position. Can really just start the snowball mentality in the favor of SK. Now looking to try and get this turret as well. Need to push these minions in, but Scarf is clearing the wave up nicely. I don't think the heal does actually affect the minions. Raph, though, will be able to get in range. Can they get the turret on this push? No, they cannot, and they put that Ordain down to stop Kiana Nakoa chasing on forward. A Gauntlet will catch up Wrath. Kavalafar, though, stuck in it. Good Fear provides some space. Kavalafar laying down the damage. Dragon's Breath, though, going to come out of Dark Potato trying to find the kill, but Fountain keeps everyone healthy on SK, and oh, the burst coming out of SK as well. Almost finding the kill onto the Scarf.
One shot's up in 3 seconds. Does he have enough energy to actually pop it? He does. Not going to go for the execute, though. Everyone's healed up a little bit too much for that. Yeah, interesting series of events there. Both teams playing on a knife's edge to be able to actually get out of there without going down. Impressive stuff either way. Redix got to be careful, though. Tyrus doesn't have a ton of energy.
That turret is literally 1 HP there. Maybe 2. Maybe 2. If you sneezed whilst backporting, I think it would go down.
Yeah, I like the fact that G2 didn't really mess with trying to keep that one alive. Was never going to be worth it or work. I would have liked to see them actually just back away immediately to the jungle for the farm instead of delaying a little bit there. SK, they do get a gold mine as well off that turret push, so they get a ton from that. It was a very long series of events, but it is important to be able to break it down, I think, holistically. And what you need to realize is that by G2 making that initiation in the lane, they actually gave up that turret, and they actually gave up that gold mine. They picked a fight they couldn't afford to, put simply. That is something which I think does speak a little bit to perhaps the mentality of the team right now. When you've practiced this comp a lot, sure, there's going to be times where any comp is able to make a play in the early game. But you got to realize this is not a composition designed for that. And I do think that G2 were jumping the gun a little bit, trying to go into the gauntlet and make something happen, when they could have just continued to play a little bit defensively and have not given up so easily those objectives.
There's going to be another siege set up for SK here. Keanu Nakoa is going to just get melted down. Redix late to the fountain, and G2 going to lose their carry. Gauntlet will be issued, but it's not going to do anything but just force SK away from the turret for half a second. They can just regroup and re-harass. Turret falling very low before the shield even gets procced. And once more, SK are in a position where they are sitting great. A 5,000 gold lead, a snipe onto Dark Potato, actually not finding any damage. The fearsome shade going to come through and push everyone on G2 back so SK can exit the stage left safely. They may even look to take the Crystal Sentry here. G2 have just not been showing much contest, but Keanu Koa, when he does move forward to do so, finds himself stunned, and Tyros with 721 damage on that bad mojo will take him down.
Really solid stuff from SK. We were talking about this earlier, Dowsey. You said they kind of got a snowball with this composition, and I think that was true. But they are doing exactly that, so SK has got what the doctor ordered here. G2, never out of it with a composition like this until you're really out of it, because you do have such a strong late game. But at the same time, the big thing to realize about being in this position only 11 minutes in is that the avenues for you to actually earn gold have basically just narrowed to your back camps and the lane, which is not a position you want to be in when you have two very gold-hungry heroes. Scarf out of the jungle is just as gold-hungry as Scarf out of the lane. The advantage that you have is that your early game clear is good and that you scale well with levels, but that advantage is completely diminished when you're playing the kind of game that G2 is right now, where you're on the back foot to this extent. It makes avoiding being snowballed on all the more critical. Right now, who do you really give the gold to? Is it Vox or is it Scarf? I guess probably Vox, because you've got the two item spike now on Scarf, but still, this is a really suboptimal way for G2's composition to be playing.
Keanu Koa will get away from the damage now, but the fountain was forced. The gauntlet goes down, it catches Kavalafa. Not revealed under the turret, I don't believe. He is safe for now. G2 certainly trying to make moves here, AJ, but every move has just been easily sidestepped by SK. The threat's not there, and Keanu Koa just taking so much damage. He goes down to the glimmer shots. Dark Potato caught in the ordained, and look at Kavalava charging forward. So much crit damage. The one shot gets blocked by Redix to save Dark Potato's life, but the choke point turret is down at 12 minutes 15 seconds, and the snowball has been turned into an avalanche well and truly here for SK.
Feels bad, man. Alright, so breaking point now picked up for Keanu Nakoa. That is not the item I would have gone for, to be honest. I think it's very optimistic of him to think these fights are going to last long enough that that item does anything. We've been seeing pretty consistently him burst down by glimmer shots before he even does a single point of damage, so I don't know. I might have gone for more defensive itemization and just kind of relied on the combination of the fact that you have two damage sources and they're diversified. You know, weapon and crystal means that you don't have to tunnel on just building damage, because if you go more defensive, both of you combined can do enough damage to take someone down. That's one way of looking at it, at least. I mean, there's another argument to be made that, you know, maybe just catching someone out of position and killing them with two very high damage threats is also pretty good. But I think based on the way this game is playing, it's not what I would stake my hopes on for G2. SK Gaming has a lot of ways of just making these longer fights work for them too. I mean, Tyrus and Raph both have a good deal of sustain.
Nakoa and Dark Potato getting melted here. G2 struggling to keep their lives about. The minion candy going to allow for this push by SK to be extended. Oh, and a great stun onto Redix with the Ordained. Stops the gauntlet. One shot onto Keanu Nakoa. It's all falling apart for the former European champions here. And unfortunately, it doesn't seem like there's much they can do. Unfortunate circumstances for sure, but circumstances that cost you game series, and SK will happily find some revenge towards G2 after what G2 did to them last season around this time as well. Just one more turret before that Vein Crystal is opened, and SK just patiently waiting for their opportunity.
Yeah, I think the biggest thing to take away from this game, and hopefully this is something that G2 can take away from the game and think about heading into the next one, is that they did do this to themselves in a large way. They gave up leads in the early game by plays that they were creating that didn't need to happen. I want to see them play to their win conditions in game number 2 a little bit better. I'm speaking about this as if it's a foregone conclusion, because it almost is. There is a possibility that there's a comeback, but it's definitely going to be very tough for G2 to do that.
Well, there's the engage. Kiana Nakoa will get melted. That's Redix now going to be taken out as well. And only Dark Potato left remaining, and the Ordained will trap him into a one-shot, into a double kill for Tyraz. There's the Ace coming through, and the conclusion has been gone. I'm not sure that's how you say it, AJ, but regardless, it is just going to be SK taking down the base and finding game 1 of this series. Unfortunately for G2, they are going to have to play the next game much more confidently in a tough situation. Head high going into game 2 is much needed.
Yeah, I'd like to see G2 just buckle down. You know, don't get overly tilted by this game. I think it was their mistake that caused it to snowball so hard, but at the same time, you know, SK really strong stuff to actually capitalize on that as effectively as they did. You know, G2 composition-wise had what they needed as well, so maybe, you know, just pick the same thing and play better in game 2. That's a possibility for G2 as well.
Well, let's throw it back to our desk here, AJ, to see if the analysts have any words about game 1 here.
Well, we said we had to look at the jungle matchup, and Tyraz absolutely dominated it. 6-0 and 2. You have Grace to help with that all-in. Fortress helps with the all-in.
They could do a Dagio too, potentially, if they're going to do weapon power Grace. That could come out. The Dagio Fortress, pretty strong. It was a good comp back in the day. Oh, Scarf. Scarf, weapon power Grace. This is such a weird composition.
Why do you do this to me?
This is a really weird composition. He might be lane Grace. Might be a lane Grace here. Or maybe a weapon Fortress. I mean, I don't know. Kavalifar's going to surprise us. Who knows?
At this point, whatever we call this, it's going to be theory crafting.
I'm assuming it's going to be the weapon Grace in the lane with the Captain Fortress and a jungle Scarf. I'm not a fan of it, but I mean, if anyone can make these off-meta picks work, it's Kavalivar. He's been known for doing this. You know, back when Lance first came out, he was the one that played the Lance in the lane. It's going to be Krull as the final pick for G2. So is that going to put Samuel up in the lane? Like,
Samuel lane, Krull. But
this is a weird
Krull
draft.
actually is not good against Fortress because the Mortal Wound and the Bleed, like you can actually beat a Krull.
Where am I? All right. Where are you? So, Hundor made it back in time. That was close.
Very close.
It was very close to being at the point where we would have actually had to start 2v3. So he is extremely lucky. Maybe the adrenaline pumping through all of the members of G2 right now will give them that edge, Dalsy. They certainly need something. They need something. Maybe just having Hundor will be enough. You know, they have been practicing a ton this past week. As they were saying, you know, they've been practicing 6 hours a day, something like that. That is a lot of Vainglory. The composition they have this time is a little bit different than the last game. We do not typically see the early game compositions coming out of G2. You and I were talking about that earlier on. This is more of a mid-game composition, I would say, that they're running. The Samuel and the Krull do have a big spike after their first item. Then they also do stuff later on, but I don't think they do quite as much as a Scarf. Again, though, I mean, another caveat that we got to talk about. Kavalifar's on this Grace. Now, I believe, and I could be wrong, and maybe it was a different team, we did see Grace in lane early after her release. I'm pretty sure it was Kavalivar who played it. That's a bit I think might be wrong. It did, I mean, it does have some noticeable strengths there. It has a lot of damage. It is pretty tanky. It's very high movement speed, can rotate easily, can get away from ganks as a result. And also, when you go for a weapon power Grace, you have a lot of damage in the early game, which is very reliable. It's hard to not land your damage because just going in with Benediction procs your perk. But it does fall off pretty hard as you head into the later stages of the game. The question is whether this is the bridging the gap that Scarf needs to become strong later and it won't matter, or whether or not, you know, these two just don't spike enough at the same time that it's kind of like 2v3 at any given point in the game, you know, except for like the mid game, I guess.
All right, so I feel like that there's just so many things to talk about as well. Like the fact that we have Samuel in the lane as well. We just don't very much see the CP laners unless they're Celeste, I guess, or CP Idris. I was actually expecting very hard for this Scarf also to be in the lane. It would just be a throwback to old times, AJ, but even more spicier is just Kvalifar melee weapon power laners and laners that aren't laners. That's the Kvalifar special. This is an exciting matchup for me. With G2, Hundor back at the helm. Whether or not he's in a stable place, we don't know. But he is back for the team in their darkest hour, perhaps you could say, for this season. They were to turn this around, AJ. Win this game and reverse sweep SK off the back of Hundor's return to the series, then that's certainly a story to tell.
Oh, absolutely. It would be pretty huge for G2 in that situation. I do think that their composition probably has the overall edge, but it's going to rely on them not conceding any early advantages to this Grace. It's going to rely on them being powerful enough in the mid-game to disrupt Scarf from snowballing out of control then. There's a lot of windows of opportunity that SK has to just, you know, solidly lock this one in. So I'd say the onus is on G2. I guess that's a good way of putting it, right? Like the onus is on G2 to actually win this game because SK has the ability to play pretty safely and still be very, very strong.
How strong are we thinking weapon power Grace is going to be for Kvalifar as this game goes on? I remember when they played weapon power Grace in the jungle Tyras, it was the first week Grace was enabled for Vainglory8, and it didn't feel like it was that impactful. Now, if it was Kvalifar to play weapon power Grace for SK in previous times, then I've missed that. So I can't really comment on whether or not I know this well. Certainly, I've seen weapon power Grace have impact, but not on a competitive stage. We are going to see a gank coming out, though, for G2, and that is going to be Kvalifar trying to run away. Boots popped, running around the corner with a nice speed buff, and Keanu, Hundor, sorry, Dark Potato to jump on in. Kvalifar will go down. It will be first blood over to Dark Potato, and the weapon power Grace seemingly finding some difficulty.
Not an ideal situation when the pick you kind of took for the early game falters. Regarding your question about, you know, this weapon Grace, as the game goes on, as in the late stages of the game, in the late mid stages of the game, it really is fairly weak because your ultimate is it doesn't really do anything. You're not tanky enough to safely channel it. Nearly going down there.
Held my breath.
You're not tanky enough to use your ultimate, so you're kind of pretending you have two abilities. You don't typically want to use Holy Nova unless you have to, because you're actually taking yourself off of basic attacks for the entire duration of the channel. It's kind of like Weapon Samuel, a little bit, but better. Right? Weapon Samuel is a hero that has good synergy with Weapon early, and then no synergy later. Grace is more like great synergy early, medium synergy later. You know, you tend to build into more of a bruisery path where you become a little bit tankier and run point for your Scarf here. You try and intervene when your opponents dive onto him. It can work, but it definitely falls off and its role really changes. Which puts a lot of pressure onto Tyrus to actually be the main damage source. And his gold income in the jungle is not necessarily going to be the highest. So this is an interesting game. I personally would actually swap the laner and the jungler on SK after the first item is picked up. Because I think you want Kvalifar in lane early to be a bit of a threat in rotations and in just, you know, making it difficult to safely farm. But then you want the Scarf to be your main damage threat late, so swapping up and giving him the main gold income source is probably a good plan as the game moves on. We'll see if they actually do that, though. Not many teams go for that strategy.
It's going to be an engage from SK, but Dark Potato's lurking here. Going to get knocked up by the Holy Nova. QUARTERFINALS able to prevent that engage, and a Dragon's Breath going to come out. Oh, it's a burn! And it's going to be Dark Potato falling. Tyra's with the kill. Hundor poked down. Raph looking to try and secure that one, but cannot get in range. Does not have the damage. Didn't want to pop his Fountain either to sustain under the turret. Keanu Koa, he may lose his life. He does. Falls down, and the Fountain comes out to keep QUARTERFINALS alive. They're going to get the turret here fairly simply, and G2 starting to fall behind. 2,000 gold in the bank for SK.
Really nice plays there. I mean, they decided, all right, now's the moment when we're going to utilize this early game power from Grace. Obviously, Fortress is a great dive buddy for basically any melee character who wants to get into the action. So, you know, that part of the composition working as intended, it's very difficult for Scarf to do damage in a lot of positions with this team comp, because he's just going to fall too far behind to sort of be able to be in range safely of putting down poke. But in that situation, you know, if you're in the lane and you're already kind of moved up, it's not so difficult. So it works out for them there. G2, that's definitely not what you want to have happen early on here. They need to avoid, you know, giving any advantage over to this early game pick of the Grace. Later on, they can deal with it just fine. But we saw this last game as well. Like, they gave over leads too early. They couldn't come back from it.
No fight breaking out, and Dark Potato in trouble. Great Oblivion, though, from Hundor. Puts all three to sleep. That is going to shut down that engagement right where it stood. SK certainly with tempo here, and they're going to look to try and take the gold miner instead of a fight. They'll get that uncontested. Their gold lead is going to grow even further. G2 struggling to make this Cruel work in the early game, and it's kind of where Cruel has most of its power.
Yeah, especially if you're committing yourself to the tension bow build, right? Like, this is really the path that G2 wants to take is something where they kind of fight in the early and mid game. They've still got the mid game as an option, but the early game has really not gone very well for them. We'll see if they can come back a little bit. I think once we get a Poison Shiv on top of this tension bow from Dark Potato, that is a window perhaps for them to make some more plays. We do need Hundor probably to pick up one more item too, because against the Grace, you know, when she has the first maybe 2 items of her weapon build, feels like she has 3. So you need to be able to compete on that axis of item power. Right now, though, it's actually pretty difficult for smart farming opportunities to come through from G2 as well, though. With an early turret kill, SK has a lot of pressure on the map, which is very strong when you have a Grace, because her engagement threat range is extremely high. Benediction is a very long-range dash, and it is followed up by a slow by default. So it really buys time for someone like Raph and Tyrus to get into the action.
And see how SK decide to put the pressure on. I guess the one thing that they've got going for them as far as win conditions are concerned here, AJ, is that yes, Grace will fall off in damage late game, but they've got the best late game damage CP carry in the game, arguably in that Scarf. And so once we do hit that stage, the pressure will be on Tyrus to be able to output that damage, but we've certainly seen that Tyrus is one of the top performing junglers in Europe, and that kind of pressure he can meet very well.
It can sometimes be kind of rough to play the Scarf into the Samuel, so we'll see if that matters. In the late game, Samuel, of course, very good at constantly moving around, because he doesn't have to commit himself to, for example, long animation times on his abilities, and that can make it difficult to land Spitfires if Samuel's doing his job and juking around quite effectively. But at the same time, you know, you have some element of prediction there with the Drifting Dark. You know what direction Samuel wants to go in. Makes it a little easier. SK, they've kind of taken their foot off the gas pedal here, and I wish they'd put it back down with force. I do think that they need to. Heading into the mid-game. Oh.
Ooh, shut down by a Brett Bullock, though. Here comes Dark Potato from the side, looking for Tyrus, but a good block from Raph going to stop that from Hell's Heart. The Dragon's Breath being wound up, the Oblivion will go out, and it puts the Scarf to sleep. Hundor, a second huge ultimate from him. But QUARTERFINALS not done yet. Dives on in, finds a lot of damage. The burst as well that comes through once he gets that Poison Shiv built up, he can actually apply mortal wounds to all 3 with the Retribution auto attack.
Yeah, that's pretty nice. That's going to be a good situation, sure, for SK. They are doing a decent job of starting to take away some of the resources that G2 wants to utilize in the jungle. Oh, here comes the G2, though.
Yeah, G2 looking for a re-engage here. Kiana Koa, though, going very low. Kavalifar should be safe. The gold miner being taken by SK, but it's too risky to look for the burst just yet. Instead, look to poke down G2 and prevent them from going for the gold miner instead. It was actually a minion candy put onto it as well, which increases its tankiness and the damage it outputs. And so it kind of is an anti-steal move. I believe it was SK who put it down, considering the fact that Rap has been investing into minion candies this entire game.
Yeah, and I kind of like that, to be honest. That's a way that G2 comes back into the game in full force. Whereas if you go in and you invest some time into the gold mine and it doesn't work out, and you just have to back up and take the jungle, well, no one wins. It's a very neutral outcome. So why not take that path when the alternative would be giving G2 a team who can really start to put on pressure in the mid game? The obvious outcome could be that they get that.
There's going to be the gold miner taken, though, by SK here as the fight comes out. Lots of damage onto Raph, and he has to go away. Another Oblivion goes out. The Crucible from Raph had already been used, and that is going to be everyone to sleep. But, oh, Tyra's the damage! A double, a triple for Tyra's! This Scarf has come online. The Broken, they're finished. And an ace for SK.
Not sure how that went so well for SK. I gotta think back on it, because actually I think Kavalifar mistapped on his ultimate and healed either himself or Tyrus over Raph, who was the only target low at the time. So it's honestly, mostly just about the raw power of the Scarf on 2 items here, compared to what was being offered, I feel like, by Dark Potato specifically. Dark Potato was not able to get onto the targets he wanted to in that fight. Didn't have any of the CC or the stick-to-itiveness that he needed. So ultimately, a pretty solid fight there coming out of G2. Sorry, SK. And off the back of that, they've got, again, very good pressure on the map. They've already taken down the Sentry once. Things are starting to get out of control gold-wise. We need to see Dark Potato pick up his second item. That's going to be critical. You need Poison Shiv to deal with Kavalifar's heal, which can keep Tyrus alive, but you also need it to deal with the fact that Tyrus now has an Eve, which is keeping him in a lot of these fights that otherwise maybe G2 could take. It's pretty hard, though, because we're already, like, what I said at the beginning of the game, I think, rings true here, which is that G2 has, in a vacuum, the stronger mid-game, but
a fight breaking out and G2 running. Where SK chasing to the jungle is the question. The Crystal Sentry starts moving up. Currently, they don't know where Dark Potato is. I don't believe they've had vision of him at the middle shop here. But SK going to start pushing up this aggression. Hundor, a lot of damage, and Dark Potato is coming from behind as well. SK going to get flanked by Dark Potato. Going to run straight towards him, and that's Tyra stunned up. Oblivion goes out. It's blocked, though, and Tyra's still alive. Dark Potato trying to find the kill onto the Scarf here, but they're all gauging onto Dark Potato, and Dark Potato still sustaining, but will go down. Hundor can't quite find the damage out of energy as well. Does not have Eve. The Dragon's Breath ramping up, but Kavalifar doesn't need it. Finds one for his own, and that's going to be Tyra's finding the ace for SK. The turret will melt, and SK into the base of G2.
Straight up, if a Poison Shiv had been there on Dark Potato, that fight goes differently. Because simultaneously, Tyrus actually lived by virtue of his sustain from Eve, and Dark Potato died because he didn't have enough sustain. That really was on a hair's edge there. It could have gone the way of G2. They just needed that itemization, so it's very unfortunate that G2 hasn't been able to pick that up yet. What I was about to say prior to the fight beginning was that, as I said earlier on, the reliant thing here for the side of G2 for them to win this game is during the mid-game to not allow a significant advantage to go the way of Tyrus, right? Because that's the point where he is vulnerable in that he's trying to make plays, but isn't necessarily at full power level. Unfortunately for G2, every single fight in the mid-game has gone the way of SK Gaming. Tyrus has very...
Tyrus is caught here, AJ. taking a lot of damage. The heal comes out from Kavalifar to try and keep him alive. The Oblivion's there. It puts him to sleep. No, it's blocked, but it's enough to kill the Scarf here. G2 winning the fight. Perhaps they can continue this aggression. Kavalifar, though, wanting Keanu, almost finds the kill. Slows Hundle, and Raph gets in range. Hundle, Drifting Dark, finds one. Kavalifar instantly turns around, not wanting to play games with this Samuel. A 2 for 2, but a successful kill onto Tyras puts G2 at a safe position.
Both in the context of the game and also in who Hundor killed and how, I think we can say that that fight was pretty favored, actually, for G2. There was a poison shiv picked up right before that fight. Worth noting, because it really did make all the difference in actually being able to kill Tyrus, which is Dark Potato's job. That's the thing that he needs to do in these fights. Moving into the next couple of fights here, I do think we really need to keep our eyes on Tyrus. He might need to change the way that he's playing a little bit now that Poison Shiv has come through. For Dark Potato, he cannot start the fight in the middle of the fight. He probably needs to focus on poking and just make G2 hard engage from a position where they actually have to travel quite some distance to get that down.
Kavalifar is Weapon Power Grace, but has purchased an Echo here for the second heal onto Tyras. Still provides enough healing as a Weapon Power Grace to be impactful. And this is also something to watch out for. Yes, the Poison Shiv will cut that healing down by 33%, but it's going to be a double heal coming out, and maybe the double heal is enough if channeled to just give the shielding the 40% damage reduction as well as the heal so Tyra survives, because you can't negate that damage reduction through Poison Shiv. SK in the lane here.
I actually really like this ult, by the way, from Kavalifar, because the thing is, normally if you go heavier into weapon power than just the 3 items that Kavalifar has gone, your heal really doesn't do much, and by the time you're ready to use it, you know, you're at risk of just dying. But by going for an Echo, what you're saying is, I'm going to go in and I'm going to use Benediction. I'm going to get the one big burst of damage down because of the weapon power that I have. And then afterwards, I'm kind of transitioning role. I'm just playing Interrupt. He's actually maxed his ultimate instead of the Holy Nova as well, which on a Weapon Grace is kind of interesting. I think, yeah, I like the fact that he's kind of mitigating the weakness of his heal in this build by just saying, I'm gonna heal twice.
Lots of damage coming out. Dark Potato, though, charging forward. That's a great Holy Nova, but blocked up by Dark Potato. Here comes the Dragon's Breath flying out. Oh, that's lots of damage for SK. 1-2, looking for the third. It's a double kill, and it's an ace for SK with a minion wave pushed up here, AJ. It's all done and dusted. Last season, we saw G2 upset SK 33 HP forever on that Vein Crystal, which resulted in SK dropping to third. In this day and age, though, SK will maintain their second position of the summer season, taking down G2 in week 6 and progressing to day 2.
Sometimes the Balrog gets Gandalf. What can you say? Hundor not able to come in at the last minute and save his team here. From top of the tables down to the position that they're in right now, G2 has had a tough summer season. SK looking real good, though.